So I think readerहरुको बानी पनि चेन्ज भइसक्यो आजभोलि त people are reading international content, so they know what good journalism actually looks like. So उहाँहरुको expectation change भइसक्यो. So unless and until you can actually change how we do news, and unless and until we can actually be transparent about our news gathering process, त्यो trust भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ अलि गाह्रै हुन्छ.
भनेको मूल कुरा चाहिँ हामीतिरै फर्किनु पर्यो. हिमाल मिडिया मेला 2025 को बिहानको यो दोस्रो सत्रमा यहाँलाई स्वागत तथा नमन गर्न चाहन्छु. म सन्त गामगर. डिजाइनिङ अ न्यू डिजिटल स्पेस फर जर्नलिजम भन्ने शीर्षक रहेको छ र यसको लागि वक्ता हुनुहुन्छ दि वन एन्ड ओन्ली अनुप काफ्ले. म उहाँको विषयमा थोरै कुरा भन्न चाहन्छु. सुन्दरनगरी पोखरामा जन्मनुभएका काफ्ले पत्रकारिता जगतमा चाहिँ नेपालमा मात्रै हैन नेपाल बाहिर पनि उत्ति नै परिचित हुनुहुन्छ र रेस्ट अफ दि वर्ल्डको प्रधान सम्पादक रहनुभएका उहाँ हालै मात्रै कान्तिपुर मिडिया ग्रुपको बोर्ड अफ डाइरेक्टर चयन हुनुभएको छ. त्यो चाहिँ सोशल मिडियाबाट थाहा पाएको सूचना हो. यसको लागि उहाँलाई बधाई दिउँ होला. यसअघि उहाँ चाहिँ काठमाडौँ पोस्ट अङ्ग्रेजी दैनिकको सम्पादक रहिसक्नु भएको छ भने काठमाडौँ पोस्टको लिडरसिप लिनुभन्दा अगाडि चाहिँ उहाँले 1 दशकभन्दा बढी अमेरिकाका विभिन्न सञ्चार माध्यममा चाहिँ काम गरिसक्नु भएको थियो. जस्तो द वाशिङटन पोस्टमा चाहिँ 6 वर्ष डिजिटल सम्पादकको भूमिकामा रहनुभयो. त्यस्तै बसफिटमा डेप्युटी वर्ल्ड एडिटरको जिम्मेवारीमा रहनुभयो भने यो रोड्स एन्ड किङडममा पनि सम्पादकीय नेतृत्व प्रदान गरिसक्नुभयो. काफ्लेले कतै भन्नुभएको छ, मैले पढेको थिएँ, बलियो कन्टेन्ट जुन मिडियामा आउँछ त्यो नै अन्य मिडियाका लागि चुनौती हो. त्यसो भए प्रकाशन प्रसारण हुँदै यो डिजिटल युगमा आइपुगेको पत्रकारितामा प्रतिस्पर्धा चाहिँ कन्टेन्ट बिचकै हो त, वा डिजिटल स्पेसले आजको पत्रकारिताको प्याराडाइम सिफ्ट गरिरहेको छ? यो यसको जवाफ चाहिँ दिनको लागि अब म ढिला नगरी निम्ताउँदैछु अनुप काफ्लेलाई.
यो चाहिँ मेरो फर्स्ट media conference in my home country, so I'm really excited to be here, and I thank Himal Media for giving me the opportunity. संसारभरि मिडियाको बारेमा बोलेर उ गरेर जाने लाग्दा आज यो नेपालमै गरेर म एकदमै नर्भस छु. खास किन हो त्यो चाहिँ थाहा छैन. त्यो अब उहाँले अघि सोचेर घोचेर के भन्नुभयो त्यो चाहिँ त्यो घोच्ने काम चाहिँ अहिले Q&A मा गरौँ ल है. So what I'm going to do over the next 30 minutes or so is I'm going to spend some time discussing what's really happening in digital news landscape globally, and what are some tried and tested tricks to navigate this moment. So what's really happening globally right now? We are living through an unprecedented pace of change. Think about how we consume news today. It's no longer just morning newspaper or evening bulletin. म बच्चा हुँदाखेरि चाहिँ मैले पत्रकारितामा एकदम रुचि राख्न थालेको. मेरो बुवाले त्यो छलफल, जनआस्था, दृष्टि बेलुका 2 रुपैयाँ दिएर ल गएर पत्रिका लिएर भनेर राष्ट्र बैंक चोकमा पठाउने, अनि म दौडेर गएर पत्रिका लिएर आउँथेँ. अनि त्यो द्याट्स हाउ माई जर्नलिजम काइन्ड अफ क्युरियोसिटी रियली बिग्यान हैन. तर डिजिटल डोमिनेन्स मिन्स मोस्ट पिपल गेट देयर न्युज फ्रम देयर फोन्स, फ्रम देयर वेबसाइट्स, फ्रम एप्स, एन्ड दिस इजन्ट जस्ट ह्यापनिङ नाउ, इट्स बिन ह्यापनिङ फर अलमोस्ट 15+ years. म वाशिङटन पोस्टमा 2009 मा जोइन गर्दाखेरि हाम्रो त्यहाँ मोबाइल जर्नलिजमको टिम थियो. रिडर एनालिटिक्स मोबाइलको लागि मात्रै भनेर छुट्टै राखेको एउटा टिम थियो, राइट. सो वाट्स ह्यापनिङ राइट नाउ, खास यो एउटा टेक्नोलोजिकल शिफ्ट मात्रै होइन, इट्स अ फन्डामेन्टल चेन्ज इन हाउ इन्फर्मेसन फ्लोज. With this shift, we've seen obviously a dramatic decline in traditional advertising revenue. The money that once sustained newsrooms, including many in Nepal, they have largely moved to tech giants. पहिला जति advertising revenue news organizations हरूमा आउँथ्यो त्यो सबै अहिले Silicon Valley tech giants or even global Western tech giants, Spotify for example, right? जसले Joe Roganलाई over $1 billion मा चाहिँ they bought it, right? So this leaves us with a critical question: how do we fund the essential journalism that we do? अर्को को च्यालेन्ज भने सोसल मिडिया अभियसली यहाँ अघि पनि अगाडि सोसल मिडियाको बारेमा कुरा भयो सोसल मिडिया इज अ डबल एज स्वॉर्ड on one hand it's an incredible tool हाम्रो आफ्नै कामको डिस्ट्रिब्युसनको लागि for reaching audiences directly for engaging with them for breaking the news but on the other hand it's obviously a hotbed of misinformation noise distraction and making our job of delivering credible information even harder. And finally, we're also operating in what's called the attention economy. आज भोलि चाहिँ अब यहाँ कतिको attention economy को कुरा गर्छौं हामी पश्चिममा चाहिँ एकदम धेरै attention economy को कुरा गर्छौं especially tied to news. There's an overwhelming amount of content obviously news websites हरु त छँदैछ नेपालमा पनि हजारौं news websites हरु छन् हैन and everybody is fighting for a few seconds of a reader's time a viewer's time a mobile ma especially. So how do we cut through that noise and ensure our most important stories are heard? You couple of weeks ago यदि तपाईहरुले न्यू योर्क टाइम्स को पडकास्टहरु सुन्नुहुन्छ भने एजरा क्लाइन्ट को चाहिँ एकदमै राम्रो एउटा अटेन्सन इकोनोमी को बारेमा पडकास्ट छ. I would encourage everybody to listen to that. So given all these challenges, obviously it's very easy to feel overwhelmed and to think about survival, right? हामी पत्रकारितामा धेरै survival को कुरा गर्छौं यहाँ बाहिर. But our goal isn't just to keep our heads above water. Our goal is to thrive in this environment, to innovate, to adapt, and to lead. So more importantly, our goal is to have impact. Journalism ma sabanda important कुरा नै impact हो, हैन? Especially in a country like Nepal, creating real impact through journalism is more crucial than ever. We need to hold power accountable, inform citizens, and tell the stories that truly matter. I want to talk a little bit about what are some of the visible trends. I don't want to dwell too much on them. I think most people are familiar with some of these things, but I just want to shed light on how people are thinking about it, right? How the news industry at large is thinking about it. If you look around you, look at yourselves, I want to ask a question. How many of you check your news on your smartphones first thing in the morning? बिहान उठेर स्मार्टफोनमा सबभन्दा पहिला समाचार पढ्ने मान्छेहरु कतिजना हुनुहुन्छ स्मार्टफोनमा? Okay. अनि how many of you actually do that throughout the day? दिनभरिमा? Surprising, it's like 50-50 actually. है? तर overall largely हेर्दाखेरि चाहिँ mobile is actually no longer just a way to consume news, it is the primary way. Whether it's for a smaller publication, मेरो Rest of the World भन्ने non-profit publication हो, हाम्रो 80% readers come through mobile, right? If you look at a lot of larger publications, sometimes it's 90% plus. So this is obviously happening right here in Nepal with increasing smartphone penetration. This means as content creators, I mean journalists पनि content creators नै हो end of the day, हैन? We must think mobile first. Mobile first भनेको journalismलाई website को journalismलाई directly mobile मा translate गर्ने मात्रै हैन. We really have to think, is our website responsive? Is our content easy to read on a small screen? Are we reaching audiences where they are? This is one of the most important things. यसको बारेमा अलिकति पछि कुरा पनि गरौँला, हैन? Are we reaching audiences where they are on their phones but also on various social media platforms? So the shift to mobile fundamentally changes what kind of content works best. Long form text still has a place in journalism, obviously, but the demand for short, digestible, and visually engaging formats has exploded. Think about the rise of platforms like TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts. Most news organizations in the US, and I think this sort of trend has already begun, they have invested heavily in training journalists to do news on a lot of these platforms, right? As journalists, we need to explore how to tell compelling stories, deliver updates, or explain complex issues concisely through video. हाम्रै Rest of the World मा पनि we started as a digital magazine. त्यो भने एकदमै राम्रो journalism, धेरै पैसा दिएर, incredible photography, 5,000 words, 10,000 words, right? They're great. They have an impact. They get you awards, right? But they don't always reach the right audiences. So we've been thinking long and hard about how do you translate narrative features into short, palatable videos. Similarly, obviously, interact graphics, infographics, and data visualizations, they become increasingly important. They break down very complex information, make it engaging, and allow users to explore data at their own pace. म यहाँ नेपाल आएको 3 हप्ता जति भयो क्या. I've been thinking a lot about stock market news. हरेक नेपाली वेबसाइटदेखि नेपाली पत्रिकामा त्यो यो यति अङ्कले बढ्यो, यो यति अङ्कले झर्यो. But I have no idea actually how the stock market functions or why it's moving up, why it's moving down. हामीसँग कुनै publication, even including Bizmandu or आर्थिक अभियानले त्यो एउटा analytical तरिकाले समाचार लेखेको चाहिँ मैले अहिलेसम्म देखेको छैन यहाँ, हैन? अर्को कुरा obviously the decline of traditional advertising. यसमा चाहिँ perhaps one of the most painful trends होला यो traditional media हाउसेसहरूको लागि हैन. For decades advertising हाम्रो प्रोफेसनको लाइफ ब्लड थियो, but the model has fundamentally been disrupted, and the consequence is clear, which basically means we cannot rely on advertising anymore, and what this has done is forced us to be creative. I mean, newsroomहरु पनि creative हुनु पर्यो, हुँदै छौं बाहिर, and more and more journalists are actually thinking like entrepreneurs. Newsrooms are exploring multiple ways to generate income, which leads us directly into user-generated revenue, which we'll talk about in a little bit. अर्को कुरा audience fragmentation र niche content. पहिला चाहिँ हामी सबै कुरा थोरै समाचारबाट भनौँ, यहाँ नेपालमा पनि कान्तिपुर, नागरिक, अन्नपूर्ण पोस्ट, हिमालयन टाइम्स हैन, न्युजपेपरको हिसाबमा. We used to get most of our information from few newspapers and few TV channels. But the digital landscape has largely fragmented audiences across websites, apps, social platforms, niche communities. So people are no longer just looking for the news, they're looking for news that's relevant to them. Right? So it's not just samachar, आफूलाई relevant हुने खालको समाचार र स्टोरीजहरु मान्छेले खोजिरहेका छन् अहिले. उनीहरुको आफ्नो स्पेसिफिक इन्ट्रेस्ट, उनीहरुको कम्युनिटी, आफ्नो प्रोफेसनसँग सम्बन्धित कुराहरुको बारेमा. So whether it's deep dives into local politics, environmental issues, tech trends, you know, or specific cultural topics. So your trend, it actually empowers niche publications to serve highly engaged communities with tailored content. A community को really good example actually is News Laundry. जुन तरिकाले अघि उहाँले कुरा गर्दै हुनुहुन्थ्यो. They've created a community that they actually engage with, right? And that's a community that respects their journalism. And it's the hardest thing to do is engage with community, and even the harder than that is actually get them to support you. And this is really inspiring and incredible that News Laundry has been able to do that. Crisis of trust and rise of misinformation. I think everybody here is familiar with this, so I don't want to dwell too much into this. But what I'm going to talk about is your trend is एकदमै highlight गर्ने कुरा के हो भने quality, trustworthy journalism is a premium product. Right? Because the world is drowning in noise, and it's something people are increasingly willing to seek out and financially support. The final thing is creator economy and direct audience relationships. Individuals who are building direct relationships with the audience is a paradigm shift. Historically, journalists, they worked for a publication, and the publication owned the audience relationship. I think even until 10 years ago, everybody had a comment section on their website. And then Facebook tried to replace that. The one publication that has brought back actually institutionalized comment section is the New York Times, right? Because they have a highly engaged audience. But what we're seeing other than that is a powerful trend of individuals building their direct relationships with readers, listeners, and viewers. Think about independent journalists on platforms, Substack. Substack use. I think actually Pranay does his newsletter on Substack. Podcasters, obviously, Nepalma podcasting ko proliferation bhairakheko cha euta, and they actually get money from Patreon. बाहिर चाहिँ individually त्यो डोनेसनहरु रिसिभ गर्न त्यो पेमेन्ट प्लेटफर्मबाट एकदम सजिलो बनाइदिएको छ हैन. And obviously YouTubers who have a loyal subscribers, both advertisingबाट पनि पैसा आउने भयो, but they can also sort of get money directly from their readers. So they are cultivating these communities around their personal brand and content. But most importantly, new platforms have emerged that make this direct relationship financially viable. Substack for newsletters, Patreon for recurring support, or even direct payment links on websites allow creators to bypass traditional advertising models. So what does it all come down to? To me, it's audience and revenue. Audience must say, the most important thing, and we discussed this a lot, and this is something something I've cared about deeply, especially when I was running the Kathmandu Post, is who are you for? Tapaiko journalism kasko लागि ho, right? And every publication should have that audience. You need to be serving a particular audience. And I think this is also one of the most fundamental questions for any media organization or individual journalist if you're running your own platform today. Trying to be everything to everyone often means you are nothing to anyone. So do you truly know your core audience? तपाईँको core audience तपाईँलाई थाहा छ कि छैन, हैन? Not just demographics, but their needs, their interests, their pain points. What problems are you solving for them with your journalism? Defining who you are for helps you focus your resources, tailor your content, and build a stronger, more loyal connection. A lot of times, especially like, you know, folks who are trying to start something new in Nepal, you know, they reach out to me and they ask like, you know, कसरी गर्ने, के गर्ने, like, you know, let's chat, can we have a discussion? And I tell them like, don't do news. As in like, don't do something everybody else is doing. Yo, एउटा example, these are from 2 websites, you can guess what they are, you know. And I think like, you know, when I look at everything from Ikantipur to Ratopati, Setopati, online cover, you know, most of them cover the same thing. If you go on their homepage, it's the same stuff. But if I actually want to know cooling period भने के हो, त्यसको explainer मैले अहिलेसम्म कहीँ देखाएको छैन, हैन? It's very political, but you're not really helping readers understand. My mom actually doesn't understand what cooling period is. She's a retired teacher, right? And then who is loyal to your journalism? This is kind of drilling down on the first thing. Beyond just reach or page views, who are your most loyal readers, listeners, and viewers? Who comes back to you repeatedly? Who trusts you implicitly? These loyalists are your most valuable asset. They are the ones most likely to engage. They are the ones most likely to share and support your work financially. How do you identify them, nurture that loyalty, and turn them into advocates? You know? Loyalty चाहिँ केमा भर पर्छ भन्दा consistency, quality, and trust. Are you consistently delivering on your promise, on your mission to them? The reason why a lot of these things, like, you know, eventually, मेरो हिसाबले, it boils down to loyalty, it boils down to audience, is because I've been working for a non-profit publication for the last 5 years. And we don't have advertising. So we are entirely either, like, you know, philanthropically funded. I have the luxury of being funded by Sophie Schmidt, who's the daughter of former Google chairman Eric Schmidt. But we also raise a lot of money from philanthropic organizations like Ford Foundation, Luminate, Henry Luce Foundation, right? And then the other thing is, what do you specialize in? Because general news, it's fast becoming a commodity. मेरो argument, I think most publications in Nepal do general news. Most publications, right? So what is your unique selling proposition? तपाईँको niche के हो? Do you specialize in investigative reporting on a specific issue? Do you do in-depth analysis of provincial politics? Do you do solutions-oriented journalism on climate change? Or do you just do cultural commentary? Hyperlocal news for a specific community? These are all different publications, right? Because what it allows people to do is say, this is my jam, I'm going to support these guys. But I think what's happening, especially in Nepal, is that like it's sort of like a hodgepodge, it's like a porridge, it's everything, right? And I also think, like, you know, specialization, it allows you to stand out, build deep expertise, and attract a dedicated audience who's, again, willing to pay because you are adding unique value. The fourth thing is, what must you cover? You'll say mission-driven. As a publication, तपाईँको mission के हो, हैन? अनि तपाईले cover गर्नुपर्ने नै कुरा के हो? Beyond just what's trending, what is your core journalistic mission? Why are essential stories, issues, or communities that you must cover, regardless of immediate commercial returns? Ani, this thing actually speaks to your purpose, your public service role, and a clear mission provides clarity in a chaotic media landscape and resonates deeply with audiences who value impact-driven journalism. हामीले रेस्टुरेन्ट वर्ल्डमै हाम्रो आफ्नो मिसन हैन हाम्रो आफ्नो उ चाहिँ दुईचोटी चेन्ज गरिसक्यौं चेन्ज त्यो you know, as you start realizing तपाईँको core readership के हो, you need to be transparent about who you're serving and how you're doing that. And it's okay to change your mission, but be very transparent to readers. अनि अर्को चाहिँ मैले देखेको, where can you actually win when you're doing a journalism? And this is opportunity driven, right? If you look at the media landscape in Nepal, where are the untapped opportunities? I love that Nepali Times, for example, takes on climate change, right? It's almost quite regularly. But I still think there is an opportunity for a climate change-focused publication in Nepal, entirely climate change, whether it's from a revenue standpoint, audience standpoint, you know, international audience standpoint. And who is not doing something that is ripe for a new project? Where are the audiences whose information needs are not being met? So you're saying कुनै एउटा format-मा हुन सक्छ, हैन? Podcast on startups, for example. A video series on remote Nepali stories. There's a reason why Herne Katha resonates with Nepalis, right? Why is it that Kantipur Television or Image or Himalaya, like, which have so much resources and all the technical kind of like know-how and the biggest kind of journalistic manpower, why weren't they able to get out to far-flung places in Nepal and do something? TV may bhai pani, but Herne Katha is filling that gap, and I think they're being incredibly successful. I don't know their finances, but I know their audiences are deeply engaged. So the second thing is revenue, obviously. Are you still mostly relying on ads? A lot of publications are. And if advertising, obviously still dominant, but it's the singular revenue stream for your publication, you need to rethink your strategy, right? Because that is a critical vulnerability. All of you know by now is that traditional ad revenue is volatile, increasingly captured by global platforms, like I said earlier, and relying solely on it puts your long-term sustainability at risk. Public service and market-driven. This is a fundamental tension in journalism. Are you driven primarily by public service, which is informing readers, holding power accountable, serving the community, or by market demands, which means chasing clicks, optimizing for ad revenue, catering to commercial interest? The ideal is to find a balance, and I'll give you an example. म काठमाडौँ पोस्ट हुने बेलामा चाहिँ मलाई सबैभन्दा सरप्राइजिङ लाग्ने कुरा चाहिँ मार्केटिङ डङ 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 गर्दै भित्र आउने त्यसपछि यो राखिदिनु न एउटा भनेर भन्ने हैन त्यो अब म अरू न्युजरुममा काम गरेको छैन यहाँ तर त्यो चलन मलाई एकदमै इन्ट्रेस्टिङ लाग्यो अनि जर्नलिस्ट अभियसली आर काइन्ड अफ स्केप्टिकल गर्नु हुँदैन भन्ने पनि छ तर त्यो एउटा प्रेसर पनि आएको छ अनि त्यसपछि सानो एउटा यसो गरेर राखिदियो सो द जर्नलिस्ट आर अनह्याप्पी द एडभर्टाइजर्स आर अनह्याप्पी एन्ड द रिडर्स आर टोटली कन्फ्युज्ड right? So the balance गर्ने तरिका, I mean, I if you look at a place like the New York Times, I think हामी नेपालले अलिकति balance गर्न नसके जस्तो लाग्छ यो public service र market driven कुरा चाहिँ. They sit down with CEOs and do their interviews. It's entirely editorial driven. यहाँ चाहिँ अलिकति त्यो CEO को एउटा इन्टरभ्यू हाल्दिनु न किनभने एड आउन लाग्छ ठुलो भन्ने चलन छ. मैले देखेको छु. अनि the final thing, does your newsroom avoid the R word? And for the longest time, Westमा चाहिँ हामी business side र editorial side मा चाहिँ Chinese wall को कुरा गर्थ्यौँ हैन त्यो Washington Post हुँदाखेरि पनि this was in the digital era त्यो Chinese wall को धेरै कुरा हुन्थ्यो तर अहिले चाहिँ त्यो ट्याबु बिस्तारै हट्दैछ जस्तो लाग्छ मलाई पहिला चाहिँ people felt like it was compromising journalistic integrity तर अहिलेको environmentमा त्यो R word revenue भन्ने word avoid गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ I think it's a path to irrelevance and extinction. Every journalist, every editor-in-chief, every deputy editor, every video journalist, you have to talk about revenue. If you don't know how your organization is paying you, you are not going to be relevant. And actually, त्यो तपाईको लागि आफ्नै लागि pain point हो हैन. We must be entrepreneurial to sustain your journalism. You have to know how many readers are actually reading your journalism, right? 4 बजे आएर एउटा स्टोरी लेख्नुहुन्छ फाइल गर्नुहुन्छ त्यो पेपरमा भोलि फ्रन्ट पेजमा जाला तर त्यो स्टोरी कति मान्छेले मोबाइलमा पढ्यो अनलाइनमा पढ्यो भनेर कतिजनाले चेक गर्नुहुन्छ यहाँ हैन अस्ति I'll give you an example अब यहाँ धेरै कान्तिपुरको ट्रेड सिक्रेट्सहरु मैले रिभिल गरिरहेछु आज we did a really cool sort of front page project on obituaries where people wrote their own obituaries last week as a part of the Kosili thing. Brilliant journalism. I really enjoyed it and I think we got a lot of like engaging notes. But when you actually look at it, Saturday actually Nepalko त्यो reading traffic actually dips. People don't like reading on Saturdays. Maybe it's just in Kantipur, maybe it's like elsewhere, but that is a trend. So what happened was because we weren't promoting it on other days, the online readership for such an expensive project was low, right? So there was no strategy around paper चाहिँ बवाल बनाउने तर त्यसलाई अनलाइनमा चाहिँ हामीले कसरी बलियो बनाउनु भनेर धेरै strategy नै भएन त्यसमा. Is anything actually working? Yes, it is. Right? And obviously Manisha's publication and her presentation is an example. What's actually happening is some good news. Revenue is rebounding for many publications. Over half the publishers last year, they saw increase in their reported revenue. Digital advertising grew 3.8 to 12.8% year and over, which is really exciting. यसले चाहिँ के भन्छ भन्दा त्यो strategic adaptation धेरै publicationहरूले गरिरहेका छन् that's paying off. If you actually look at, the easiest example in our industry is the New York Times, because of what they've done. The chart here shows उनीहरूको subscription revenue मात्रै from the first quarter of 2012 to the first quarter of this year, and kind of on the upward trajectory. यो वर्षको भने January, February, March मा मात्रै they made $464 million just from subscription. That's the revenue, right? Second thing, diversify, which essentially is a way of saying don't put all your eggs in one basket. Commercial revenue, example, selling products, services, has grown significantly. Multiple income streams create resilience and growth. I've actually, this is something I was thinking about a lot before I left the Kathmandu Post, because हाम्रो एउटा industry नै छ नि विदेशीको लागि report लेखिदिने. A lot of journalists actually, when they leave, they go work for organizations, हैन? So there are publications in the West that actually do those for specific industries and specific audiences, and I think like there's no reason news organizations can't do that with a separate arm as a way to earn revenue. Arko kura, evolution of traditional models. Publishers are transforming. They are no longer just content creators, but product-minded businesses. They are thinking about what the audience needs, how to deliver it as a valuable product. Newsletter hosts, event hosts, data service hosts. This shift in mindset is crucial for success. A really good example is when Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post, they created a CMS called the ARC, and they started selling it to a lot of other publications. And for the longest time, it was incredibly successful. So the power of user-generated revenue. Subscriptions, obviously they're providing paid access to exclusive content. यसमा चाहिँ couple of examples दिन्छु म. यो user-generated revenue को 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 example. Primarily subscriptions. New York Times obviously pioneered the metered paywall. Metered paywall भने readers get a limited number of free articles per month. Then they are prompted to subscribe for a full unlimited access. They've also done bundling, obviously. तपाईँको sports, recipe, games. This model has allowed them to build a massive digital subscriber base, as the revenue from earlier shows. But they're also sort of proving that high quality, trusted journalism is something people are actually willing to pay for. Arco model is a freemium model, and The Guardian operates on a freemium model, which means they're keeping all their content free to read globally. Instead of a hard paywall, they make passionate, direct appeals to their readers for voluntary financial contributions. If you have a Guardian porn, you'll often see this ad that kind of comes up, and it's a really compelling note that they write, right? I mean, they have teams, they have journalists kind of work on those things, essentially appealing to readers why they should be supporting that journalism. And their approach has also successfully converted millions of readers into supporters who value their independent public interest journalism. And then the third example in subscriptions is a hard wall. And Financial Times is a great example because if you go to ft.com, you directly hit a paywall. You're not going to be able to read it, right? Most of its content behind a subscription barrier from the start. But this kind of content works for a highly specialized business critical information where the value prop is clear and essential for professionals. If Bismandu someday decides to do a premium product for CEOs and put it entirely behind paywall, maybe, I don't know how many CEOs there are in this country, they will probably pay for that product if the journalism stands up. And then memberships. Memberships, I've seen it work, especially in non-profit publications, right? Membership model, they provide content access, but with some benefits. A really good example, one of my favorite is the Texas Tribune, a nonprofit publication that obviously covers Texas in the United States. It thrives on a membership model. Members are not only supporting their investigative and public service journalism, but they also, as a consequence of that support, they get access to exclusive events, behind-the-scenes content, and opportunities to engage directly with reporters. And I think that's key. A lot of newsrooms are opening up their newsrooms to readers. They can send suggestions, they can have weekly calls, they can have monthly calls. There are a lot of publications where the publisher actually speaks with their top 10 or top 20 donors, for example. Donors, when I reader donors, right? And ask them what do you think about our journalism? What is working? What is not working? Arco is Mill Media. Mill Media is a UK-based journalism platform, and it's a fantastic example of a local news outlet that has built a strong community around its membership. what they do is they offer in-depth local news. So I think they're in about like 10 cities in the UK at this point. And the members often receive benefits like exclusive newsletters, which generally other people don't do, and early access to content. So this is another cool thing a lot of publications do. If you have a narrative feature or an investigation, you are releasing it to your members first, and then maybe the next day or after a couple of days, you will release it to rest of the public. Right? And then they're also invited to local discussions. My other favorite publication is a publication called Zetland. It's a Danish digital-only newsroom. And I think this is one of the publications that have actually gotten membership right. They focus on in-depth constructive journalism, and members are actively involved in this journalistic process, including direct interaction with reporters. त्यो भने समाचारलाई influence गर्ने हैन, but they are essentially talking about what kind of issues they're facing, right? What kind of problems would they like to be solved. So what this does, I mean, community ko kura gareu, this fosters a strong sense of ownership and community among their paying audience. I think until a couple of years ago, they had 40,000 paying members in Denmark, and they were so widely popular that they moved into Finland and they built another 20,000 paid subscribers. These are all paid. The other one is donations. Obviously, they represent pure voluntary financial support from readers who believe in your mission. It's often used by nonprofit news organizations, again, that are focusing on public service journalism. The rest of the world, we get a lot of donations and philanthropic donations as well, but that's largely driven based on coverage areas. So about 3 years ago, as we were covering tech, we realized that the gig economy is a big part of technological sort of progress. So I reached out to the Ford Foundation because Ford Foundation was a future of work program. And they really liked what we were doing in terms of covering the gig economy around the world. So we got, for the first year, maybe 200,000, and now we have like an $800,000 funding from Ford Foundation just to focus on the gig economy. Right? Technology bhitar pani gig economy cover garnalai. Crowdfunding, obviously, it allows journalists, newsrooms to raise funds for specific, often ambitious investigative projects. About US तिर चाहिँ Kickstarter use गर्ने चलन छ. अस्ति one of my friends who's doing this documentary on Amazon, I saw he started a crowdfunding project यहाँ नेपालमा पनि. I think it's called WeFunder or something, so I realized you could actually do that here. Events like this one, and I just have to say, I'm so excited to see so many people pay for an event. नेपालमा खास पैसा तिरेर इभेन्ट जाने चलन छैन नि. And I know that because I was responsible for kicking off Kantipur Conclave, maybe 2018 or so. What I told Kailasar at the time was we are feeding people lunch, we are feeding them dinner, and very expensive booze at a 5-star hotel. This is an expensive affair. We need to make people pay for it. And you're inviting people from all over the world. Advertisers paisa dincha tara revenue bhane चाहिँ I have never been to a free event in the US, whether it's Texas Tribune or New York Times. Every event is a paid event, right? Merchandise, I don't know how many organizations do merchandise, but if you take example of the New Yorker and the Atlantic, especially the loyalty भएको merchandising is also a source of revenue. Right? So can this work in Nepal? I think much of this can obviously work in Nepal, but the key thing is your journalism worth paying for? That's the most important thing, right? And यसमा चाहिँ there are 5 things I want to hone in on. First thing is, are you essential? I think a lot about what it means to be essential, because rest of the world कुरा गरौँ, I left Kathmandu, we launched it in 2020. We had an incredible product team, New York Times, New Yorker ma kaam gareko, head of product. We had an incredible, obviously, founder who gave us the resources. So we built this world-class publication that looked really neat, really clean. Obviously, COVID ko belama launch gareu, so we didn't really kind of had a good sense of how it is actually working, right? But 22 vaccine ayeपछि as I started traveling and speaking to readers around the world and engaging with other folks in journalism and tech, the thing that I heard over and over again, I was like, oh, what a nice mission, what a nice looking website. You guys are doing such great work. And I realized I don't think, it's a compliment, but I don't think it's a that kind of compliment actually helps you in the long run, right? What you want to do is be essential for some people, for specific groups. Do you provide information or a service that your audience cannot easily get elsewhere, or that they need to navigate their lives or work? Right? In a world overflowing with free information, why should someone pay for your journalism? Are you providing critical, indispensable information? Is it something they must have to make informed decisions, understand their community, or hold power accountable? Think about the job to be done. Job to be done when a concept business man for your audience. Like, what is the job that you're doing for your audience? Are you helping them save time? Are you helping them make money? Are you helping them stay safe? Are you helping them feel informed in a unique way? And is your content, and if your content or your outlet disappeared tomorrow, would your audience genuinely miss it? That is what being essential really means. The second thing is, are you different from the rest? There is a meme here, I don't know if you can see it or not. When Pushpa 2 came out, I'm an avid reader of Nepali journalism, by the way. I go on like so many websites during the day, especially in weekends. I saw everybody was writing about Pushpa 2 le kati kamayo bhanera. Haina? And it's just a small example, but I found a meme and I thought that was really interesting. Again, like this is essentially a commentary on how general news is a commodity for most publications in Nepal. But you have to answer a critical question. Why choose you over countless other news sources, blogs, or social media feeds? Do you offer a unique angle? Do you offer a deeper analysis? Do you have exclusive access or a particular specialization that others don't? This isn't about actually being better, it is about being different. Do you have a distinct voice, a unique beat, or a specific community focus that no one else covers with the same depth or passion? In a crowded market, differentiation is key to attracting and retaining paid subscribers. And the third thing is, are you engaging with your audience? Again, like, I'm so glad Manisha spoke before me, and like that's a really good example of engaging with your audience, right? Paid content isn't a one-way street. Paid content, memberships, getting people to support you, right? These are relationships. Are you truly engaging with your audience? Do you listen to their feedback, respond to their questions, and involve them in your journalistic process? For example, Q&As, surveys, community forums. Engagement actually helps build loyalty. Loyal readers are the ones who actually convert into paying supporters. They feel a connection. Again, Kathmandu Post example, I felt like we were making a lot of mistakes. We do that in Nepali journalism. There is the culture of corrections. So we started a correction. We actually redid the paper entirely, and then on page 2 we started putting correction sections. And every time there was a correction online, we also posted it at the bottom of the story, so readers. This is not rocket science. Publications have been doing it for ages. So we started introducing that, and people were very, very thankful. I think it's one way of being transparent. Which is the next thing is are you actually transparent? Because user-generated revenue thrives in loyal communities that you can engage, listen to, and get involved. For all of those things, transparency is paramount. And I don't mean transparency just in spirit, right? Are you transparent about your sourcing? एउटा समाचारमा स्रोतको अनुसार लेखेर मात्रै पनि पुग्दैन जस्तो लाग्छ आजभोलि, हैन? Are you transparent about your news gathering process? What was involved in creating that investigative report, for example? Are you transparent about your advertising? Are you writing advertorial? Are you saying this is a sponsored content, right? And if you call yourself a non-profit, are you transparent about your funding and your budget? And I hope Himal Media will start this trend by actually being very transparent about it, because it's one of the biggest ethos. I was telling Kundaji, you can actually go on Restorworld and look up what my salary is and what are the top 10 salaries of people working at Restorworld, right? We are a 501c3 non-profit organization. Our entire tax audit, entire budget is there. What that does is readers actually know how we are spending our money, right? And they, in turn, support us. They donate their money to us. And the final thing is, are you truly independent? And the key word here is truly. Are you free from political pressure? Are you free from corporate influence? Are you free from hidden agendas? Obviously, you naparne kuraharu ho, but I know these are some of the tensions that we see in Nepali newsrooms. this kind of transparency is really important because it helps build trust. Audiences are, again, increasingly willing to pay for journalism they believe is unbiased, fearless, solely dedicated to public interest, and your independence is a selling point. That is the business prop, especially in markets where media capture or bias is a concern. It is a core reason people will choose to support you directly. And on that note, I'm going to leave you with this here today. Be different, but don't give your journalism for free. Thank you so much for your time. I'm happy to take questions.
अब हामीसँग 15-20 मिनट मात्रै भएको हुनाले मैले सोध्नुपर्ने क्वेसन चाहिँ अब यो चियाको टाइममा सोध्छु। म चाहिँ सिधै उता के अरे फ्लोरमा जान चाहन्छु। उहाँलाई प्रश्न गर्नको लागि चाहिँ यो माइकमा कृपया गरिदिनु भयो।
नमस्कार सबै यहाँ उपस्थित महानुभावहरूलाई। सर्वप्रथम त म हिमाल मिडियालाई यो तेस्रो मिडिया मेलाको अवसर दिलाइदिनु भएकोमा धन्यवाद दिन चाहन्छु। चौथो सरी। हाम्रो अनुप सरलाई एउटै मात्र प्रश्न छ, त्यो के हो भने समाचार वेयर इज द फोटोग्राफर? फोटो वेयर डिड यु सी द फोटो भ्यालु, फोटो जर्नलिस्टको भ्यालु, एन्ड हाउ डु यु रेट द फोटो जर्नलिस्ट भ्यालु एज ए फोटो जर्नलिस्ट independent, as you said. That's it.
To me,
thank you very much.
To me, photography is journalism, right? Photojournalist, but photography is integral to, especially your digital media, it's integral to how you're actually engaging with your audiences. So, whether you're out on the field, समाचार सम्प्रेषण गर्ने बेलामा पहिला अब पत्रिकामा ठाउँ भयो भने फोटो राख्ने अथवा
fill in the gap.
Sorry?
Fill in the gap.
Fill in the gap, actually it adds value, right? It adds value to news. It helps people provide context, right? It makes things more vivid. So to me, photography is like news, separate banda pani photography is journalism. I don't think there's a huge difference there.
Value. How do you rate the value of photojournalism's act and risky?
How do I rate their value to a news organization? I mean, I don't think there is any difference between a reporter or a photojournalist. I mean, they're all equally. I mean, same thing goes for data analysts, same thing goes for infographics folks, same thing goes for a digital producer or a videographer, right? I mean, to actually reach audiences, wherever they are, you're going to need all of these teams to work together in a newsroom. So invaluable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mende. Rama Parajuli ma'am.
You talked about audience engaging with the audience. Manisha talked about that also.
Yeah.
How do you do it actually? And I guess you have been doing it. So what has been the most effective way to engage with the audience?
I think it starts with knowing who your audience is, which is why I've emphasized, are you essential? Who's your journalism for? It's really important to understand who you are targeting, because without that, you can't really operate. You're just kind of shooting your journalism in a vacuum, right? So the reason why we've been successful, and I think Manisha's publication has been successful, is because you've identified a problem, right? And you're trying to solve that problem for a specific set of people. And that's how you engage them. But engaging means genuinely kind of having a dialogue with them, right? Are you asking them questions at the end of your story? What do you think? Share your with us. That's a very easy way to engage. And in Nepal, we actually don't have that practice, right? That's one level. You can have a comment section. You can actually have, these days, especially when a lot of publications during the COVID period started doing Zoom events. Zoom events, they allowed Q&A times. That's actually called engaging with the audiences. You ask them what they care about, and you're trying to cater to their needs. So actually, it's not that difficult. Culturally, we're actually not doing it as much as we could have.
I have a follow-up question on that.
Okay.
Does a reporter do the audience engagement, or you have to?
we obviously have an audience engagement team, but their job is not to kind of just engage. It's actually very tactical. They're doing audience listening. They're telling us like what kind of stories are resonating or what did a competitor publish that we can kind of like do value add and move the news forward, right? I think अहिलेको कन्टेक्स्टमा चाहिँ you cannot have siloed newsrooms, right? Every journalist should be able to, go on a camera and summarize their stories in 30 seconds or a minute. And in the same way, every journalist should know before they're pitching a story or writing a story, who's this news for, right? If you're writing about a particular issue, say, अस्तिको white body को report, if you're going to do an explainer, who are you trying to target? Then decide, like, are you going to publish this just on Instagram? Your routine of Nepal बन्दको crowd को लागि मात्रै हो कि हैन? Is this actually something that needs to go on the front page, right? Is this a video? Is this a podcast? And I think it's the journalist's job to think. Journalist भने everybody from like editor down to a reporter.
त्यहाँ कोही नआउनु भएको हुनाले एउटा मैले मौका छोपिहालेँ यही बेलामा। अहिले हामीले रेभेन्यूको कुरा गऱ्यौँ, अडियन्स डाइभर्सिटीको कुरा गऱ्यौँ। यो बिचमा अर्को के अरे देखिएको अर्को च्यालेन्ज चाहिँ ट्रस्ट इस्यु छ। यो हाम्रो टपिक अनुसार यो डिजिटल स्पेसमा ट्रस्ट इस्युलाई चाहिँ ओभरकम गर्नको लागि चाहिँ के गर्न सकेला, यहाँको एनालाइसिस के छ? नेपालमा
I think मलाई चाहिँ यहाँको जर्नलिजमसँग अलिकति आम नट लाइक सबैलाई एउटै बकेटमा राख्न खोजेको होइन। मलाई चाहिँ यहाँको जर्नलिजममा अलिकति प्रब्लम के छ भन्दाखेरि आई थिङ्क वी हेभन रियली इभल्भड हाउ टु राइट अ न्युज स्टोरी, राइट? अघि तपाईँसँग कुरा गर्दाखेरि हो कि क्या हो, इफ यु रिड कान्तिपुर, गुड इक्जाम्पल, ओर नागरिक, ओर सेतोपाटी, ओर अनलाइन खबर, त्यो फर्स्ट 2 सेन्टेन्सेस मलाई उस्तै लाग्छ क्या। अङ्ग्रेजीमा लेख्दाखेरि चाहिँ हामी एकदम टाइट तरिकाले समाचार के हो भनेर यु ट्राई टु डिस्क्राइब इट, बट नेपालीमा लेख्दाखेरि you're essentially kind of like repeating the stuff भने like this is what we used to do 20 years ago and we're still doing it right now. त्यो एउटा फर्मेटको कुरा भयो। I think readers want quick, त्यो जे चाहिएको इन्फर्मेसन त्यही हो। अर्को कुरा ट्रान्सपेरेन्सी हो। I don't feel like readers here really trust news organizations किनभने हामीले ट्रान्सपेरेन्ट तरिकाले त्यो समाचार सम्प्रेषण गर्न सकिरहेका छैनौँ। इन्भेस्टिगेसन्स इज अ डिफ्रेन्ट इस्यु, तर रेगुलर न्युजमा पनि म तपाईँलाई एउटा इक्जाम्पल दिन्छु अनि मेबी दिस विल एक्चुली ट्रान्सलेट, एन्ड दिस इज अनदर अफ अनभेलिङ हाम्रो कान्तिपुर काठमाडौँ पोस्टको सिक्रेट। सञ्जीव इज देयर, सो टेल मी इफ आई सुडन्ट से दिस। ठ्याक्कै म छोड्नु अगाडि चाहिँ यहाँ सबै समाचार संस्थाहरूले यो यति ग्रुपको, एयरलाइन्सको होइन, यति ग्रुपको बारेमा समाचार आउन थाल्यो। यो ल्यान्ड डिल होइन, गोकर्णकोदेखि लिएर लुम्बिनीकोदेखि लिएर यो सबैको उसमा आउन थाल्यो। एउटामा मात्रै होइन, धेरै ठाउँमा आउन थाल्यो। अनि अब हामीले त अलिकति रेपुटेसन बनाएको थियौँ त्यति बेला, डिप इन्भेस्टिगेसन्स गर्ने यस्तो उस्तो भनेर। अनि त्यसपछि मैले पहिला एउटा रिपोर्टर लगाएँ, सञ्जीव म बस्यौँ, प्रणय पनि थियो। लाइक वी सेड लाइक ओके वी हेभ टु पुट अ रिपोर्टर, वी पुट 1 रिपोर्टर। अनि दिनदिनै हाम्रै सिस्टर अर्गनाइजेसन कान्तिपुरले गरेको रिपोर्टर पनि वी कुडन्ट म्याच, एन्ड आई वाज लाइक रियली एङ्ग्री। हामी लाइक यो त गर्न सक्नु पऱ्यो। सो इन अ कपल अफ डेज वी पुट 8 रिपोर्टर्स अन इट, 8 रिपोर्टर्स इन द न्युज रुम, पोलिसी लेभलको होइन, डिप लाइक एक्सपर्टिज भएको। कति कुरामा त म बिहान अफिस आएर नेपाली पत्रिकाहरूमा लेखेको आधारमा मैले जापान पनि फोन गरेँ, यो ठिक यो ऊ हो भन्दा उनीहरूले होइन भन्थ्यो क्या होइन। सो देयर इज ल्याप्सेस इन त्यो जर्नलिजम, त्यो कसरी गरिन्छ भन्ने कुरा। एन्ड आवर 8 रिपोर्टर्स कुड नेभर म्याच एनी अफ द स्टोरिज। अब त्यो कि चाहिँ हाम्रो कमजोरी हो होइन, कि चाहिँ त्यहाँ लाइक त्यो जुन तरिकाले त्यो समाचार रिपोर्ट, त्यो फेक भनेको फल्स भनेको होइन है, जुन तरिकाले गरिएको थियो नि त्यसमा चाहिँ त्यो प्रोसेस मिलेन भन्न खोजेँ, किनभने हामीले एउटा प्रोसेस इस्टाब्लिस गरेका थियौँ। सो आई थिङ्क लाइक रिडर्सहरूको लागि चाहिँ यु हेभ टु बी एबल टु विन देम, यु हेभ टु बी एबल टु कन्भिन्स देम that the way you are reporting your news, the way you are gathering your information, तपाईँको सोर्सेसहरू, हामी रेस्ट अफ वर्ल्डमा 3टा सोर्सेस नभइकन we cannot really write or verify like anything. अब त्यो कल्चर यहाँ न्युजरुममा कति न्युजरुममा छ छैन थाहा छैन। सो आई थिङ्क रिडरहरूको बानी पनि चेन्ज भइसक्यो। आजभोलि त पिपल आर रिडिङ इन्टरनेसनल कन्टेन्ट, सो दे नो वाट गुड जर्नलिजम एक्चुली लुक्स लाइक। सो उहाँहरूको एक्सपेक्टेसन चेन्ज भइसकेको छ। अनलेस एन्ड अन्टिल यु क्यान एक्चुली चेन्ज how we do news, and unless and until we can actually be transparent about our news gathering process, त्यो trust भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ गाह्रै हुन्छ।
भनेको मूल कुरा चाहिँ हामीतिरै फर्किनु पर्यो,
हजुर,
न्युज रुममै फर्किनु पर्यो।
एब्सोल्युटली, इट अल स्टार्ट्स इन न्युज रुम।
बाहिरी कारण चाहिँ सहायक मात्रै भयो।
हजुर,
स्योर।
Hi.
Sania Sa.
Hi. Thanks for the roundup. For fear of niche audiences being too small in size or numbers, which raises concerns about financial viability, the Nepali media market hasn't really seen a huge inflow of niche news publications. That's my observation. Meanwhile, most publications are making the same news promise as the next. उसले पनि थकाली, उसले पनि थकाली, उसले पनि थकाली अनि. So where are the successful niche news publications? You mentioned the Financial Times, but there are so many different categories that are sustainable and the journalism stands. What do you think is the key to changing this? Do you see this changing, etc.?
I mean, I think it can change, and this has been one of my pitches to Kantipur folks, right? Obviously, it's a national paper, and they should cover the country, and they should do it rigorously. But also, I talked about what must you cover and where can you win. Really good example is Grist. Have you heard of the Grist? Mm-hmm. The Grist is a non-profit publication that just covers the environment, and they've seen tremendous kind of like success in terms of fundraising, in terms of philanthropy, in terms of reader support, and they even have specific beats like indigenous kind of like communities, because they are looking at environmental impacts on indigenous communities. अब यहाँ चाहिँ के हुन्छ भने हाम्रो environment is kind of like one of the brackets. And we haven't gone deeper. So I think niche content, niche kind of like readership requires going all in on a particular kind of beat. Another really good publication that has taken off in the last 2 years, sorry, my examples are all going to be Western because this is what I consume, but I also think they've been incredibly successful. It's called The Examination. The Examination writes about the health sector, right? But they cover it through 3 things: tobacco, food, and something else. There are 3 things, just 3 things. And they've already won National Magazine Awards, and they've had US ma अहिले 500 million ko fund aako cha ni. They've gotten funds from that. So I think there is a lot of success in going narrower. And I don't think you shouldn't expect 500,000 readers in a place like Nepal probably. But I'm sure if you picked specific things, you will see 100,000 people who are deeply engaged. What you want is engagement, right? Because you can use that engagement to discuss revenue with advertisers. You can use that engagement with philanthropic groups, saying this is what you're covering, and there is an audience for it. But most of the new publications that are coming out in the West are actually narrow coverage area-based publications. They aren't. So पहिला चाहिँ हामी Huffington Post, Daily Beast, Mashable, they were just doing the same thing. But now it's just narrower and narrower. Does that answer your question?
A little bit. Thank you.
Has धन्यवाद. Last question.
Hi everyone, my name is Ahmad. I am here representing TikTok. I think we've recognized the challenges faced by journalism, especially by the advertising industry. But if you put this question in front of media house owners or their marketing teams, they'll tell you कि भाई घर भी तो चलाने हमने, right?
Sorry, what was that?
About marketing teams and media owners, and when you talk to them about advertising and the pressure they face to bring business, they would tell you कि भाई घर चलाने हमने, business चलाना हमने. So my question is, how do you strike a balance between keeping the sanctity of journalism alive and also ensuring that the business, your media houses have enough financial resources to keep running?
Actually, to ensure that they have enough financial resources. I don't think it's a hard task, because editorial does journalism, right? And marketing team's job is to actually realize who that journalism is resonating with, and then go and bring ads or go and try to engage that particular community. I think where it is failing right now, and I see let's just use Kantipur as an example, right? If you go to an article page, you will see 4 or 5 different slabs of ads. It's incredibly distracting. You have no idea if a reader of Kantipur cares about Samsung or cares about Nerolac paint or cares about this insurance company. I think what marketing teams of this day and age they're doing is they're actually trying the newspaper era tricks. त्यही companyको the same company, the advertising sort of like, companies, ads have been essentially translated for this thing. So I think the marketing team actually needs to be, innovative as well. There are ways to think about sponsored content. I think, I'm not ashamed of the word sponsored content actually. If there are things that TikTok deeply cares about, I hope the organization's okay with sponsoring a journalistic content with full disclaimer that says this was prepared for our partner by a different team and essentially writing about issues you guys care about. Because for you, that brand value is also important. And I don't think we've tried that enough here, right? Like sponsored content actually gets a bad rep, but it is working. I mean, you see organizations like GE, organizations like Samsung, these same organizations look at how they advertise abroad and look at how they advertise here. Right? And I think it's the culture, and at the end of the day, it's the newsroom, the marketing team, the editorial that can change that culture.
Right, thank you.